I feel like language is a very, very important part of dismantling white supremacy and racism. You have to be careful about the words that you use and that you're using the correct words to talk about the correct things. Hey guys, hey friends, hey YouTube fam, how you guys doing? Welcome to the new people tuning in for the first time, girl. You're a little late, but we still love you. So I was reading this article, and I believe it was in the LA Times earlier this week, that was talking about, it was written by a black woman, and she was talking about how we should maybe think about retiring the term POC, aka person of color. And I'm going to put the article down in the description box so you guys can read it if you so choose to do so. But it was a very interesting article, and while I don't necessarily agree with everything she said in the article, I did think she brought up some points. So basically what she was saying in the article, again, you should go read it for yourself. Always encourage y'all to do your own research. But basically what she was saying in the article is people use the term POC, or people of color, to make spaces seem inclusive, but in reality they don't really reflect any exclusivity of black people's, particularly black women. And the author is a black woman. So basically, like, she gave an example, I think it was like a book club or something, that said women of color friendly, or like person of color friendly, and then she shows up and it are maybe a couple of women of color, but none of them are black people. She talked about the fashion industry, how, you know, they'll say they're diverse, or we're including people of color, but then you get there and it's like all light-skinned people, it's all like non-black people, right? There isn't really much representation for black people, and even the black people that are there, they're like one type of black person, you know, thin, light skin, yada yada yada. Y'all know what we're talking about. In conclusion, basically she was saying that maybe it's time to retire the term person of color because it's just not inclusive of black people. I don't necessarily agree with her about retiring the term, but I do agree with a lot of the points she made in the article, particularly that word is used as the cop-out for things. But what I would rather do instead of retiring the term is enforce people to use it correctly, because people do use it incorrectly, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about. I feel like language is a very, very important part of dismantling white supremacy and racism. You have to be careful about the words that you use and that you're using the correct words to talk about the correct things. For example, do not call every black person an African American, because every black person is not African American. African American is not just a blanket, like, politically correct term that you use for all black people. It is a term for very specific group of black people. It is black people. It's not even black people who are in America, which a lot of people have somehow come to believe. African American is a term that was created for black people in America who were descendants of the slave trade. That is specifically what that term is used for, but people have turned it into just like an overall blanket term for every black person in America, period. I've even heard people in other countries call black people African Americans in other countries. Like, how? How are they African American if they're in Europe? How? That's not how that works. Anyways, we're getting off track. My point is people have used the term person of color when they're referring to a specific group, and that is not what that term is supposed to be used for. Person of color is supposed to be used as like a blanket term when we're talking about large scope racism, right? If we're talking about the big picture, like racism exists and it affects people of color, that's the time when you would use something like people of color. But when we are trying to dissect a specific issue that is particular to one group of people, you can't just say people of color, because that's not what that is for, and it's not inclusive. And like she said in the article, and I do agree with her, every person of color or every minority group is not suffering equally. So that's why you can't use a broad term like people of color when you're discussing specific issues. You can't use people of color when we're specifically talking about Black Lives Matter, right? Because that is not a movement that applies to every single person of color. It's a movement that applies to black people. So say black people. And I feel like a lot of people even well-meaning people somehow have gotten this idea that the term black people is offensive. I think it's really because white people get offended when you call them white. But the term black people, Asian, Native American, those are not offensive terms. Those are literally what we are. Just because white people don't like to be reminded that they white does not mean that calling people exactly what they are is an offensive thing to do. If you're talking about issues within the black community specifically, you have to say black people, and vice versa for any other ethnicity group on the planet. If you're talking about something specifically about Asian people, you say Asian people. And even better, be specific. Are we talking about Koreans? Are we talking about Chinese? Are we talking about Japanese? You have to be specific with the language that you're using if we want to really actually talk about these issues in an effective way. If you start applying the wrong terms to things get misconstrued. People don't understand what you're talking about. This is one of my biggest issues with the term cultural appropriation, is because people have just been slapping it on literally just anything that they don't like. Because the internet got a hold of the term without actually understanding what it means, and now they apply it to literally just anything that they don't like that white people are doing that has nothing to do with cultural appropriation. For example, Bruno Mars. People love to say Bruno Mars is culturally appropriating. No, he's not. He's literally not, because he literally gives credit to where he's getting his shit from. You don't have to like him or like his music, or you can feel weird about it, but it is not cultural appropriation. Just factually, it is not cultural appropriation. But that's a video for another day. Okay? And we gonna do that video. Back to the article when she was talking about how people use the term person of color to make themselves feel inclusive. That could be applied to literally any piece of language, which is why I don't necessarily agree with her claim of getting rid of the term, because we see the same thing with the term diversity. I'm so fucking tired of hearing that goddamn term diversity, right? Because everybody loves to say, we're diverse, we're for diversity, oh my god, bitch, we just the diversest bitches on the planet. And then you get there and there's 2 black people and they part-time, or there's a white woman and 1 white gay man. X off their diverse box because it's not all straight white men, but that's still not enough, right? That's not really diversity if you're just throwing in basically the same people. That's more what she's talking about, and that's why I don't necessarily agree with her that we should get rid of the term. I think we just need to start enforcing that people use the correct language when they're talking about things. I don't think we need to get rid of the term, because I do think person of color has a specific usage that is still valid and still needs to be available to use, right? I just feel like instead of getting rid of something because people are taking advantage of it, why don't we just instead enforce people to use the correct language when talking about these things? That's just me personally. I just don't feel like solutions to things just is getting rid of them because you're tired of it. That is my 2 cents. That is my lecture for the week, y'all. Please use the correct languages for things. Y'all know my motto is Google is fucking free. If you don't know the words to use, ask Google. I promise you, somebody, myself included, has probably already told you. It's there on the internet. Google it, figure it out, ask a friend, phone home, do what you need to do. Use the correct language for things. Correct your friends around you who are using the wrong language for things, so that we can have a really actual productive conversation about racism and the shit happening in this country. And listen, bitch, these abortion ban bills, again, a video for another day, because I'm tired. Okay, we need to get these old white men up out of this bitch. Okay, get them out. Anyways, that's all, guys. Have a fun weekend, y'all. Bye. Mwah.